Yep, you read the title, you saw the thumbnail, you know what this video is about. If you're asking yourself why you should listen to a straight white guy mansplain feminism to you, odds are you're already sold on the idea.
Ugh, I don't think you can get any cringier than that.
Let's start with white privilege.
And I spoke too soon. Before we continue on with the video, please give it a like, subscribe, share it, comment down below and tell me what you thought. And if you really like my content, please consider donating to my Patreon or to my Ko-fi. You can also subscribe to my BitChute channel. I have a BitChute channel and I also have a Libry channel. Just in case anything happens to my YouTube channel, go subscribe to both of those. Now, as far as YouTube goes, please check out my YouTube community page. I post updates on when I've uploaded videos and other kinds of content. And last but certainly not least, follow me on Twitter and Parler to see my ideas outside of YouTube. Now that we have this out of the way, let's get on with the video.
Like many of you, I immediately get defensive whenever someone says I'm privileged. I certainly don't feel privileged. Like many of you, I was unemployed during the recession. So I've certainly never felt like I've ever had any tangible privilege or advantage in life, but that's because I was thinking about privilege in the wrong way. I've always felt like what I have is the standard. Those people are privileged. What I get is just the same basic package that everyone gets. But everyone doesn't get it. Were I anything but a straight white man, those dark times I experienced would have been significantly darker. Were they easy? No, not even close. But they were comparatively easier than a woman or a black person in the exact same situation.
No, they were not. I have debunked the idea of white privilege within the legal system, the schooling system, the private sector, everywhere. And I'm about to be debunking it yet again for sexism. The biggest point against institutional racism and sexism is that just because there are discrepancies doesn't mean it is necessarily racism or sexism, because there are many other factors that are hard to measure. This would include your voice, your style of dress, your mannerisms, your personality, how you just specifically talk. For example, if you talk in a black accent, the stereotypical ghetto accent, probably less likely to get hired. Not just because it looks unprofessional, but it's also kind of hard to understand what the hell they're saying. There are a multitude of factors other than biases of racism and sexism that go into hiring, firing, and the legal system. As I have said, I've done a video on the whole racism aspect within the legal system, and there is no significant evidence with police and with the courts to say that there is any systemic racism. There are some papers that do say it, but then there are some that also say there isn't any, or that it is not really clear as to if there is. Anyways, roll on with the video. Let's get this cancer over with. I've already had to listen to it once to split it up into little parts. Now I have to comment on it.
But because of my straight male whiteness and my white sounding name, I only had to apply to 67 jobs rather than hundreds. Yes, there are studies that show that job applicant discrimination still exists against queer people, women, and black people. Sometimes all it takes to have your resume tossed in the trash is having an ethnic sounding name.
For women and for black people, there is no evidence to say that they were discriminated because of their sex or race. Now, for gay people, I can debunk that right off the bat, because you can't tell someone is gay by their name or their resume unless they say they went to queer college in Queer Town. You also have to account for the factor of classism or unfamiliarity. Jerome or Dijome or whatever weird sounding names, you might not be so inclined to hire that person because that sounds a little different. I don't understand it. What is it? Or that, it sounds poor.
So while I thought I was getting the same basic package as everybody else, and it just sucks for everyone, there are some people who aren't even getting that. And that is a privilege I didn't even know I had. If I were in an emergency situation like a burning building, and I've never been there before so I don't know the layout, and a woman stands up and says we should all go out that door, but then a man stands up and says no, we should all go out that door, knowing nothing else about the situation or who these people are, I'm probably gonna listen to the man. And studies show that statistically, so would you. Does that make me a sexist?
Yeah, according to that study that is from 2001 and that is looking at studies from the 1980s and 90s, when in those decades there probably would be more sexism than there is today. And in recent surveys, like in Pew Research, they found that men and women are equally viewed as good leaders. Or they find that people say that they think women make better leaders. There's also a study that showed that there was no pay gap difference between male and female CEOs in the United States. And those are heavily leader-oriented. And according to Gallup poll, 93% of Americans would vote for a woman if they were running for president. Specifically, if they were running under their party or political view.
Maybe. But the fact that I recognize this male privilege and recognize that it's a problem is a step in the right direction. And it makes me wonder, how many times have I been that guy? How many times have people just accepted my authority or even my opinions simply because I'm a man and not because I was correct? People rarely ask me for my credentials. It does happen, but it's rare. I never get told that I must be lying about my degrees or my profession because I'm black. Yes, these are real comments from a friend of mine's channel. It's the same for women. Along with the usual sexist garbage, their credentials are always in question. Most people just take my word for it that I have the degrees I say I do.
I get the exact same thing because I'm right-wing. They'll say, oh, your sources are biased, they're right-wing sources. Or they will just flat out call me a Nazi. Literally everyone gets hate comments. And from how it sounds here, this sounds to me more like projection, thinking that, oh, because I was doing this, or how many times I've done this, you seem like you're rejecting this view on all men or a majority of men. And that's absolutely wrong to do, and is also sexist.
What most women want is equality, what many of you would call egalitarianism, and what many of you think we already have.
Because for the most part, we do.
While they do have the vote and they do technically have legal equality, for now, you're just gonna have to take my word for it that when it comes to societal power, women have less than men.
Take your word for it. I ain't doing that.
The same could be said for Black Lives Matter. You think we're here, where all lives matter, which would be great, but we're not. So the balancing force is Black Lives Matter.
I've done my video on police brutality and the supposed systemic racism towards blacks. It's all bull. You can see my videos in the description.
If you believe in egalitarianism and that's what you truly want for society, you already share a lot of common ground with feminism.
No, I really don't, because the stuff you spew out is utter bull. If you want to say there is a problem, you have to prove that there is a problem.
But they soon realized that they weren't being paid the same as men for the same work, and passed the Equal Pay Act of 1963, which was supposed to end the gender pay gap, but didn't. The act made it illegal to pay people differently for equal work requiring equal skill and responsibility based on sex. But it did allow for different pay based on seniority, merit, quantity or quality of production, or any differential based on any other factor other than sex.
And those are good standards to use when finding out what someone should be paid. In studies that find that there is some form of gap, they don't know whether that gap is based on sexism or something entirely else.
Like many of you, I thought that SJWs were just people looking for things to be outraged about or making up reasons to restrict free speech. But you only need to look at the fact that this movement exists to prove that wrong.
Oh boy, that is so retarded. That is utterly retarded of an argument. Just because a movement exists doesn't mean the problem exists. Basically, you're saying that every religion is true because there's people who believe in that religion.
People like to point to the past and say that was real racism, that was real sexism. It should have gone away and it did. What you're going through isn't real oppression.
Because often it isn't. I've heard women of today complaining of supposed sexual harassment, and when they have talked about it, it really wasn't. And when they thought it was sexual harassment, they did nothing about it. They didn't go to their supervisors or tell the person to stop. They just later on complain after they've left that job.
But men do have more power in our society, biologically, socially, and legally. Even though on paper women have the same legal rights as men, look what happens when a woman tries to take legal power. Say what you want about her policies, but a lot of the arguments I heard about her during that election were specific to her being a female.
No, they weren't. The only times that it was about her being a female was for saying that they are so proud to have the first woman president. That was it. As I've said earlier in this video, the vast majority of Americans don't give a shit if a woman is running for president. You goddamn dishonest jack. And if you're gonna say that it was because she's a woman, then give me a clip. Give me something. Cause right now, all you're doing is talking out of your giant ass.
Predictable things like what's gonna happen during that time of the month, but even subtle things like what happened during the third debate, when Donald Trump packed the audience with women who had accused Bill Clinton of sexual misconduct, which I happened to be live streaming. You can see the exact moment it dawned on me. This is one of those things that I hate that I have to say. This campaign is really turning me into one of those social justice warriors. I never in a million years thought I would say this word, or this sentence. If she was a man, we wouldn't even be bringing this up.
Kavanaugh, you dumbass! Don't be a dishonest prick. Men have been treated like garbage too.
When I see this video of someone not understanding how to use a hammer, I immediately think that his man card needs to be revoked.
Yep, this video definitely sounds like it's just projection. Because I don't think that. I just think it's someone who doesn't know what to do.
I don't know how to weld. Does that mean I'm not a man? I'll tell you what, nothing makes me feel more like a man than fixing something that most people would pay a professional to do, whether it's plumbing or even my car. When I turn the key and it works, feeling masculine is fine, whether you're strong, smart, respectful, chivalrous, whatever it means for you. But when you have to prove your masculinity through intimidation or putting others down, that's toxic.
Again, projection. I think this entire video is just you projecting, which might be legitimately from you, actual sexism. And not just towards women, but also towards men.
Or this segment.
What I actually think she's trying to say.
Oh, so we're not allowed to explain things anymore? That's not innocent explaining. That's mansplaining.
Except the problem is men really don't do that. Are there some men who do? Yes. But most men know.
And then of course, this segment. Oh, so we can't talk to women on the street now? Of course you can. But that's not the body language of someone about to tell someone else to have a nice day. This is a video about how we harass women. Again, use your context clues. Men like this exist. Even if they're a small minority, they still exist. While I know I've never had the confidence to do something like that on the street, I do know that I've said things thinking I was flirting or being nice that were probably not cool. And looking back, it makes me feel sick.
It's just flirting, it doesn't hurt anyone. How do you think people end up possibly dating? They flirt. They introduce themselves. They've done that for many years.
So when Gillette released that ad, they weren't denigrating all men, they weren't trying to make you less masculine, they were trying to make you better men. Or at least think about how you can be better men.
No, it was not. It was trying to say that majority of men or a huge percentage of men are men. That's what it was doing. That's what it was saying. That may not have been their intention, but that's what it gave off. Because the vast majority of men are not sexist towards women.
Sex is not binary. If we go by the parts you have, some people have male parts, some people have female parts, and some people have both. Though they usually only make sperm, eggs, or neither. There is no in between. So right off the bat, there are 3 options, which isn't binary. It gets even more complicated when we look at chromosomes, the thing that every argument eventually devolves to. Males have XY, females have XX, and there are all sorts of combinations that exist on a spectrum in between. They are rare, but they're not as rare as you think. It's a narrow spectrum, but it is a spectrum.
Disfigurement is not a new sex. That's not how biology works. You are an utter moron on every field. For example, if a person has scoliosis, like myself, is that normal? No, it's not. It is an abnormality. It is a disfigurement. Is it normal for someone to be born without arms? No, that is not normal. Neither is having both a vagina and a penis. Just because you have those things doesn't mean it's normal, and it doesn't mean that it's a new sex. If you're gonna say that they're an entirely different sex, then you're basically saying that people with Down syndrome are an entirely different sex because they have an extra f***ing chromosome. Do you know how retarded that sounds?
The 2S stands for Two-Spirit. It's a Native American term for people who identify as both genders, but its place in the acronym stands for anybody who doesn't conform to the gender binary, because gender is also a spectrum.
It is not a spectrum. There is no scientific evidence for this whatsoever.
The thing is, you've always known it was a spectrum. Think back to when you were a kid. What would you call a girl who only hung out with the guys and was into guy things? A tomboy. Sure, her biological sex is female, but she's kind of boyish. You probably also use the term butch. Or you called someone a girly man. By using those terms, you were passively accepting that the lines between the genders are blurred.
Gender and gender expression are entirely different things. Gender is usually the psychological view of your sex, while gender expression is how you express that gender. That is done by mannerisms, habits, hobbies, and style of dress.
So when someone says that they're non-binary or genderqueer, they're saying that they aren't strictly boy or girl. They're somewhere in between. Gender fluid is someone who moves along the spectrum. People like to make fun of the 71 different gender options on Facebook and Tumblr, but once you actually look at the list, they aren't hard to figure out, and you're probably familiar with most of them already.
I have nothing to say. I don't know how this guy can get any dumber, because
Allowing trans people in the military is just don't ask, don't tell, but 20 years later. We have the same arguments about female firefighters. As long as you can pass the same physical tests and you want to do that dangerous job, who cares what you have under the hood?
it's called gender dysphoria, you f***ing moron. Now, should it be an all-out ban? Maybe not, because there are some instances where gender dysphoria is minor. But to compare this to the whole ban on gay men and lesbians, that's just lunacy.
We've also heard all of the trans athletes arguments before. Trans women are not men in dresses. Nobody is faking being trans in order to win medals.
They may not be faking it, but they do have a statistical advantage.
If you want to live in an egalitarian society, feminism and social justice is how we get there. If you think we're already living in an egalitarian society, you're wrong.
No, I'm not. You're the one who's wrong. You're just a sexist, racist prick with a guilty conscience. If there's one thing I know better, is that you're a f***ing idiot. That's it for this video. If you liked it, please give it a like, subscribe, share it, comment down below, and tell me what you thought. And if you really like my videos, please consider donating to my Patreon or to my Ko-fi. Do all that, and I'll see y'all later.